The organization WaterCAN has been following the quality of and access to clean water for some time. We're now joined by Julius Kleynhans from that organization. As that package we just played, Julius has shown once again, and this has been the frustration of many of us as journalists. I mean, over the past couple of months especially, we've seen officials, the minister visiting, these places. They're here, there, and everywhere, and promising to deal with the problems. But all you hear is we should consider, that we need to think about, and the like. What is your sense as an organization?
Well, look, it's ridiculous to say that next year we'll have a water summit. Speaking about water quality, the Water Service Act of 1997 really clearly explains what water services providers, which your municipalities are, should be delivering. It's clean water, and the standards are very clear. I don't think there's any excuse that our municipalities and even our provincial and national government can have anymore. And I think a recent census also showed that still only 82% of people have access to piped water that comes out of a tap in or close by their homes. So I think there's a historical trend of promises that hasn't been delivered. Still in Hammanskraal, in the capital city of South Africa, communities still sitting without proper sufficient water supply. And I think if you look at the historical trends, not only have tenders been issued and people promised water, there's a heck of a lot of money that's been stolen in the process. And a lot of municipalities not adhering to the law. And we see exorbitant amounts of pollution taking place through our wastewater treatment works. Yet someone is still individually to be held to account.
The other thing that happens, Julius, is that, we talk about water when there isn't any of it. I mean, when there's a big water crisis, particularly in an urban area like Verulam or Randburg, everybody talks about it. But the moment the water comes back, everyone stops talking about it. And so, I mean, are citizens and political parties to blame for not being consistent? It requires consistent hard work to fix this thing.
Absolutely. That's why a municipality should be run like a business. If you look at the different tariff structures, people pay for drinking water, they pay for sanitation. And a lot of this is subsidized also through grants that's allocated. So there is no excuse. If you look at what the municipal legislation requires, is in these tariff structures, they need to cost account it. So they must make sure that they can maintain, that they can cover the cost of operations, that they can expand the supply to meet the demand in these communities. And they need to ensure that the water is sufficiently supplied. So that basically means that it needs to adhere to the standards of quality as well as the amount of water that people can get. So not only is it continuous maintenance and management of the infrastructure, also the bulk supply when it comes to communities and urbanization. Our towns continuously expand, especially if you look at our metros. So there's a lot of plans that show future expansion, but it's really the political parties and administration of the day that should implement these plans. What we unfortunately see is that the political parties have a magnificent amount of power and influence on the administration. Doesn't matter who comes into power, they do have an influence. And this, a lot of the times, affect the administration that's supposed to manage these supplies and infrastructure. And I think just lastly, if you look at Joburg as an example, you've mentioned it, Stephen, there hasn't really been additional capacity created through reservoir structures and things like that. So all of a sudden, when emergencies happen, when there's electricity interruptions and Rand Water cannot pump the water to these reservoirs, the amount of demand on that reservoir is significant. So they don't have an emergency surplus that can maintain them for maybe 24 hours. So a reservoir gets drained through 16 hours, and that is purely because of a lack of expansion to ensure that we can supply the demand.
I mean, in addition to reservoirs, what about the issue of skills? Because, I mean, I remember not too long ago doing a story around Nelson Mandela Bay, where the big issue, it would seem, was less about the reservoirs, but more about the ability of the municipality to actually physically, mechanically, and otherwise service the infrastructure that is currently there. And it wasn't for lack of money either.
100%. I think there's a lot of institutional knowledge that's left on municipalities, whether that's through policy or just because of a lot of people leaving the state of working for government. And I think that the problem with that is you get a lot of young, technically sound folks, but they don't have the understanding where the infrastructure is and how it works. They haven't been mentored properly. And then you also get to the latter, which you've mentioned, is a lot of shortages in skills. There's not enough people who can technically do the work that's required on maintaining and managing our drinking water plants as well as wastewater treatment plants. And then you're just talking about normal artisan work that's also lacking. It dates back as even when Pravin Gordhan was still the Minister of Kokta, where he didn't sign, I think it was 2012. Legislatively, municipalities are required to have a certain amount of skilled staff. And if you're not skilled, if you don't meet those requirements, like process controllers, it is a big problem. But funny enough, government has never held its own to account. And I think that's really just political will that we require to get the right people in the right places.
Now, Julius, I mean, let's talk about political will, because this happens in democracies. Water is a long-term problem. So from now, with the right amount of funding, we're probably looking at 10 years of hard, unglamorous, unsexy work with very few photo opportunities, right? And is that one of the reasons maybe why political parties don't talk about it? They all talk about it in broad terms. We'll do this, we'll do that. None of them say how they'll do it. And is that maybe one of the problems, that it's a long-term issue, and so people just don't want to talk about it?
Absolutely, Stephen. I think, firstly, I get the sense that it's easy to blame other political parties for what they're not doing, but there's very little plans with the political parties. I don't think they necessarily all know what to do. We're sitting with climate change crisis as well. We're looking at South Africa as one of the driest countries in the world. Yet you've got an ever-growing population and a significant demand on our water resources. The water resources that we do have, it's not like we based or built on big water resources like your biggest cities in the world. We rely on Lesotho, which is a neighboring country. The Lesotho Islands Water Phase 2 project was supposed to start supplying Gauteng water in 2018, and because of other political interferences under Nomvula Mokonyane, amongst others, this thing has been delayed. We will only maybe get water by 2029. You see, so it's really, really a big issue. And then the little water that we do have gets polluted significantly. I think to such an extent where we will go into droughts that our current treatment plants don't have the technologically advanced and innovative solutions to even clean that water to the standard it needs to be. So I think the water space is a space where you need specialists and academia to get involved. And as a politician, you almost just have to get the right people in the right places, step back and just ensure that they can do their jobs without any red tape and interference. This is not a space to try and go commit corruption. Water is a basic human right, and we are depriving the poorest of the poor people from this basic human right because of greed. And I think this is what needs to be challenged, and people need to be held individually accountable.
Let's hope they will be held accountable. Julius, Kleynhans, thank you very much for your time. He's, of course, from the organization WaterCAN. They've been following the quality of and access to clean water for some time. And I guess it doesn't help that also, the Department of Water Affairs doesn't spend 2 billion of its annual budget.